Dr. Fritz Kohle. Have I pronounced that correctly? Is it Kohle?
Yeah.
Kohle?
No, it depends on. My surname gave me so much fun throughout my years working abroad. In the Netherlands, they say Kohle.
Okay.
Meneer Kohle.
Kohle.
In Germany, it's Herr Kohle.
Okay.
In the UK, I often was like mistaken as a Asian dude, because then for some reason that KOHLE thing became KHOLE, and that somehow looks Asian to people. So, and basically I decided if I lived in Spain, then my name would be Federico Carbon, because that's what German means. It's basically coal, right?
Right.
And then if I lived in the UK longer, I'd probably be Frederick Cole or Fred Cole or something
Freddie.
like that. Freddie Cole. I think Freddie Cole.
Yeah, with a C, C-O-L-E is Cole.
Exactly. Because
or C-O-A-L, like the coal mines.
So that's what it means. So depending on where I am, they pronounce it differently.
Yeah.
But the proper German pronunciation is Kohle.
Okay, I think it's important for me to ask that because I don't want other people. It's a funny thing that people just accept that people are going to say their name wrong. I guess it's something you have to accept, otherwise it's going to irritate you.
I mean, in most cases, I think the people call me Fritz. They're not going, hey, Kohle, come over here now.
Not since you were a little boy, anyway.
Exactly.
So let's just start by introducing yourself and what sort of stuff you do and why you're here as well.
Okay.
Where is here?
Where is here? Well, we're in Bournemouth.
We are.
Are we?
Yeah, maybe I should be saying that bit. Welcome to Bournemouth University.
Yeah. Why are we here? Yeah, we're here with our students for 3 weeks to make a TV show.
And your students are from
the Netherlands.
Yeah, Breda University. Right?
Breda University, Applied Sciences. So I think a lot of the applied sciences school, they just say, we are Breda University of Applied Sciences.
I was going to say, what does the applied sciences bit really mean? Is it just basically admitting that science is part of everything?
Well, I think it's sort of like the equivalent to what used to be the polytechnics over here. So to get into an applied science school, you don't have to have what they would call VWO high school diploma. You can get into an applied sciences school with a lower degree from high school. And I think it's the same in Germany and other places. They have a very similar system. So that's basically what it is. I like it though, because not only do you have to do the theory, you actually have to also apply it. So you can't just talk about stuff, you actually have to deliver it. And that's a good thing. I like that part.
Oh, good. Okay. And would you say the courses delve into the science of stuff?
Yeah, we do. It's just nobody reads it. So we tell them, here's something to read about. Here's the theory, everybody goes, and then it's learning by doing. Right. But half of the time it's more like learning by making stuff up.
Yeah, okay. And is it mostly sort of like humanities, social sciences, or is it...
In our school, well, it's kind of like in the courses that we teach split into 3 areas, which from my professional practice before I became a teacher, they were always together, but the school decided to split into marketing, content, and production. So I'm busy on the production side.
Right.
But for me, production also means that I have to do marketing and content development. And for some reason, the marketing and content people always look at their work as something completely separate from production. So they have this separation that to me doesn't really make that much sense. In an academic environment, maybe, but in practice, I don't think I've ever worked anywhere where the marketing, content, and production people would be working like separate somehow.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean, you're doing production, I think.
Mostly.
Yeah, so you probably take a project sometimes from development all the way to distribution. And that's how I approach things. Whereas the marketing people don't seem to be doing that. And the content people always think like they're busy at the beginning. But I think the whole process is really an interconnected process, and that's what I really like about it.
I think it's probably quite hard to organise people in that. You're trying to delineate what their job role is, which is why these terms come up. But as you say, they need to work together.
You have to work together. I think for me, it's all about teamwork. I did all my work and degrees here in the UK, so I always was a big fan of people like Ken Loach. Or I forgot the other guys. The brother, Ridley Scott and his brother, and in production, that doesn't matter if you do that in development or if you come in later, it's always working in a team. And there isn't, I think in film school, in the first 6 months, you realize if you can't work in a team, you're in trouble.
Yeah, we have a lot of grumbles with students here who it's usually from the students who are really, really keen and working really hard towards something, and they've got a group of maybe 8 other people who aren't pulling their weight. But I always say to them, you're going to be the one who learns the most and gets the most from it ultimately. That's the only thing you can say.
Nothing else you can say, really.
And hopefully when they get into industry, it won't be like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But who knows?
So teamwork, really, I think that's the key in this whole business, for me at least. Because I don't think, there are these exceptions, like maybe like Wim Wenders or Werner Herzog. Some of them never went, or Hans Zimmer. I was talking to somebody about Hans Zimmer this morning. I think it was Harry, the editor, who's working with our students. And these are maybe the exceptions that never really went to a film school or something like that. But in general, I'm not really good on my own.
But Hans Zimmer would have gone to some sort of music school, presumably, wouldn't he?
Yeah, I think he's, from what I remember, pretty autodidactical. But he really brings. He never went to a film school or in that sense, and he changed the way things, from the old-fashioned way of recording a orchestra. He brought this whole electronic thing into that way of making a score, and I think these are the exceptions, and unless we're all suddenly Hans Zimmers or Werner Herzogs or something, we have to go to film school.
I think everyone would like to think they're that person.
And I think there's quite a few of them in the first semester that they realize that maybe they're not.
Well, that was me, to be honest. When I was at uni, I wanted to be the big shot director.
I was like that.
It takes a long time to sort of curb your ego, doesn't it? And,
it does.
And accept that might not be the case.
And for me, it made things worse because I went through film school with a heavy German accent. We have ways of making you do a film.
Do you need to bring your mic in this way a little bit, just so that you're? I think you come this way and bring the mic this way as well.
Like
just slide the
more like this.
Yeah,
is that better?
That's better. Yeah, just because you're off mic a little bit. So should we talk a little bit about what the students from Breda are doing here at the moment?
Yeah, we can. So what they do is they prepare in the Netherlands. It's basically they're second-year students. And at the end of the year, this is kind of like their big shared experience. Right? So some of them will go to Flagstaff. Some of them will come here.
Which is in the US, Flagstaff, yeah.
Yeah, and some of them will stay back in the Netherlands. So, and they all have to do the same thing. They have to come up with a TV show. It can be 20, 25 minutes long. And they have to do a couple of news packages for that show. And that's about it. But they do, in the Netherlands, they prepare for it by doing a test assignment, so they know what a news package is like. They learn a little bit about journalistic research, so they know how to come up with a newsworthy story. And then they come here and do it, really. And we prepare them as much as possible. So we tell them what it's like. But of course, unless you get there and you go through it, you never know what it's like.
Yeah, and this is like the 6th year of doing it or something now, isn't it?
Yep.
I've been involved from the start as well, as you. And it seems every time the students land, there's differing amounts of preparation they've already done.
Yeah.
I remember, I think maybe last year or the year before, students were emailing us ahead of time trying to get contributors sorted while they were still in the Netherlands, and we were sort of like, well, it's probably best you wait till you're here and just figure out, because some students think they can travel, to a town that's maybe 2 or 3 hours away, shoot and get back in the day.
Cheese rolling comes to mind.
And then they realise when they hear, actually it's quite a long way to travel. So I think being on the ground here is probably important for that context of stuff.
Yeah, it's always difficult to get that balance right, because sometimes they're really, really enthusiastic and they want to do as much as possible, and sometimes they do that really early, and then we have to tell them, but that's it. You can't do any more than that unless you get there. Because if we let them get too detailed and they arrive here only to find out that maybe they can't do it, right? So I think that's always a tricky one to get. And last year we had that with the cheese rolling. So sometimes we should have said no sooner. Like you can't do this; it's too far away.
But it would have been really great though. Yeah, I think that's the thing. That's why we were sort of like, it would be good.
It would be good. It sounds good,
Yeah.
But I think it's. The curriculum is pretty much the same, and what we do, and we also. 6 years ago, you had less grey hair.
Thanks for that. I started as a student mentor, didn't I? I was a student in the first year.
Yeah, I know.
Mentoring, and then I got the job working here, and it just continued from there.
Yeah, so I remember. And I think last year was also different because it was the first one after COVID.
Yes.
Yeah, I think everybody was just glad that we were able to get out and do this again, and we didn't pay too much attention to maybe what's in the curriculum.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Because we were just glad that we could get away from it.
Yeah, quite true, actually. It's interesting reflecting, isn't it, back to that time and how it changes your approach to things. I think I'd forgotten because we have 1 year off or 2. I can't remember now.
I think I can't remember either. I think it might have been 2.
Because by the time we got back to it, I sort of had forgotten how this thing runs.
Yeah,
it was like starting up from scratch all over again.
Was it 2019 the last time before? No.
What, 2019? When we did it last?
Yeah, or was it 2020? I can't remember.
I don't know.
It could be 3 years. COVID it really left this black hole in my memory.
Mm. Yeah.
It really did. I mean,
it's like that period of time is just like condensed to everything is just became 1 day almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The span of 2 years is just a big it's void that represents almost a single day in my mind. Yeah.
The same to me. It really is kind of like, because nothing really happened.
Yeah. That's what it felt like.
Other than us being at home or doing something like walking the dog.
Yeah. How did it impact you and your work? Did it? What changes?
I really hated it. Really, I did, because I think that's why I'm in production, because I like being with people. I like working in a team, and if that whole COVID thing, it really left. Yeah, I think you're totally right. It really condensed everything in my memory into like this very short time span that hopefully I'll never have to remember again. Yeah? So I really didn't like it, and I think the only thing that got me through it was that the fact that we got this little Ford Transit bus and we turned it into a kind of like a caravan thing, a camper van, and then we had enough freedom in the Netherlands to still go out. I mean, we weren't really locked into the house. We weren't allowed to meet other people, but we were allowed to go out and walk the dog and drive around. But everything was closed. For my son in Spain, it was totally different. They were literally locked up for 5 months. I mean, they were not allowed to go anywhere other than the supermarket and maybe the pharmacy or a doctor. And they literally could not go out for 5 months. So I think for us it was better.
You couldn't imagine that.
No, I could. I'd go. I think I'd go. The amount of fights I would have had being locked up like that,
Well, or the other way. I mean, there's lots of what do they call them? Lockdown babies.
There's a lot of them. Yeah, but
I think our youngest was conceived in lockdown. Not that you need to know that information.
I know, but I'm certain there's also probably a lot of lockdown divorces.
Yes, probably. Yeah. So you've got a son. Have you got any more children?
No. Love to have more children, but I think at the moment I only got one son. He's 19. He wants to study. Today is his birthday, so if he hears that, happy birthday.
Well, this won't be probably out until long after his birthday. But yeah, happy birthday. What's your son's name?
Also Fritz. He's another Fritz.
Nice. Happy birthday, Fritz.
So he's the third one in our family. My granddad was a Fritz. My dad is not, but I'm the second one, and my son is the third one.
One of my middle names is Frederick. Did you know that?
No, but now I do.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if that was in Germany, that would be either Friedrich or Fritz. Fritz is basically the nickname of Friedrich.
Right. What does your son want to study?
He does now. He went from political sciences, aiming really high, to tourism.
I love the tone of your voice on the last one. Was that disappointed dad tone?
No, it's all right. I mean, I'm okay with tourism as well.
Yeah.
It's just like, when he wanted to go for political sciences, maybe you're aiming a bit high. And I'm saying, maybe you're aiming a bit low.
What's your overall approach to parenting? Do you have any philosophies?
I think I have one philosophy that really that I wanted to get across. My own parents, they got divorced when I was maybe 7, 8, and they never really managed to speak to each other, other than the most necessary. But they never got along. And I think for me it was important that for my son that's not going to happen. Unfortunately, the life with his mom didn't work out. Colombian kind of jealousy is just not compatible with my lifestyle. It just didn't happen.
Crikey.
But it was really important to me that my son also knows that no matter where I am, I can talk to his mom about whatever it is and have a good relationship with her, and also be around as much as possible. Even, I mean, with technology, Skype, video calls, I think you can be a good dad even if you're not all the time in the same place. And I think I managed to do that to a certain extent. Of course, it's always better if you're there in person, but I also know a whole bunch of families where people live together and they're also not getting along.
Well, there's that, yeah.
So I think it's really important. That was really the most important thing to me, that I can show my son that I love him, that I'm around, even if I'm not around. Yeah, and he lived with us in Holland also for a year. So when he was 11, I think he really hated it for the first 5 months because he missed his friends in Spain so much.
Right.
So I think I'm happy about that part, that I managed to do that. We go on holidays together, we do things together. He's going to go to Germany and see my dad together with me for his birthday. So that was really important for me. I think that is the overarching kind of what I learned from my own parents, how not to do things.
Yeah. Well, I've got a similar experience. My parents divorced when I don't even know how old I was. Very young, 4 maybe.
Yeah, okay.
How old was your son when you split?
Well, he was fortunately he was really young. He was about 3. But I think even when you're at that age, you still pick up stuff that you carry with you.
Yeah, I think it's probably more like the vibe, the tone, the overall. I think actually, because I've reflected on this a lot recently,
Right.
now that I have children of my own,
Okay.
I've reflected on how maybe it impacted my life without me even realising,
Okay.
and caused maybe issues and things I had to get over. Probably still not completely over.
No,
Really.
I think you never get over any of these things. You can just, I think, if you get lucky, you can become aware of them, and then when you have that awareness, maybe you can act slightly differently. But I think it's near impossible to get, to like not being in. It's what makes you. And I think if you can accept that, then I think you can live with that, then I think you can move on from that.
I mean, I've read stats more recently about children of divorced parents and how they are less likely to. Well, the word succeed is obviously has different definitions, but
Right.
Perhaps we could just put a monetary figure on it and say they earn less in their life, or they have more struggles, or whatever, blah blah blah.
Right.
Just having to deal with things, but I don't know how much it's true, or it's probably different for each individual, and the context of how it happened is a lot of nuance, I would imagine.
I think so, because I mean, I'd like to think that I've done a lot of stuff despite my complicated parents.
Very true.
So,
Maybe you're the exception to the rule.
No, I don't think so. I know other people who are divorced.
Yeah.
So, but I think when I look at my parents' generation, I think that my parents, I think my dad also, I mean, I'm certain they loved us, and I felt that as well. But this post-war generation of my parents, my mom was Dutch, my dad is German. I think they were so busy with their own problems that even though they loved us, I think we were just not on top of their priority list.
Yeah, right.
At some point, because they were always busy with their own problems.
Yeah.
And at some point, I think I had to learn that I can't keep blaming them for that. So I think at some point in my life, you have to make a decision like, am I going to be the victim here for the rest of my life, or am I going to just move on and take charge of that problem? And that took me until, I think, I would say until 40, 45.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, that's when I then realized that also the relationships I had been in the past were a repetition of my parents' problems. And that and that's when when I got out of that, then I found the partner that I'm really happy with, and that I've been living, that's now also 17 years now.
Wow.
I've been with Aline, and I'm 4 times married. So
that's impressive.
Yeah, and I never married my son's mother. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
know?
All right.
So it's kind of like a bit crazy there.
Is this the lifestyle thing you were talking about earlier?
I think so. So I think that moment that was a difficult turning point, really. I mean, But when you make that, then I think things starting to look much better.
And your wife, Eileen,
Yeah.
where is she from?
She's from the Philippines.
Philippines, that's right, yeah.
Yeah. So we met there, working for the same company. She was she's a producer, so she would bring all her projects into post-production. So I was running post-production there, and she would, and I was always impressed how she managed to get everybody to do them what she wants them to do. Perfect producer.
And you thought, that's exactly what I need.
That's exactly what I need, because before
Someone who can organise me.
Because before it was the other way around.
Right.
And then she got another job in Manila, and I thought, I don't like her leaving, and that's when we then actually ended up together.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
How romantic.
Yeah, that was really a long-term relationship for a long time, for like nearly 3 years. But we were really so
long
lucky.
distance, you mean?
Yeah, because
long distance, yeah.
when she moved to Manila, where we worked was in the south, so I would fly about an hour from Cebu to Manila. And then
Where is Manila?
Manila is in Luzon, north of the Philippines.
Okay.
It's a city there.
Right.
And but where we were working is a place called Cebu, which is in the middle of the Philippines. It's kind of like from here to Scotland, maybe a bit to Edinburgh, maybe a bit more. So I kept visiting her in Manila, and then I got a job in Singapore working for NYU, and I kept seeing her. That's about a 3-hour flight, and she would visit me. And then I got an offer to either go back to the UK, and Manchester, Bolton. They made an offer to work at a film school there, and I thought, okay, that's interesting. It's also not an easy area to work, so I'd be working with complicated people.
In Manchester?
Yeah, near Bolton.
Why?
I think it's from what the research and the friends that I have. I think Bolton is not a particularly wealthy area. So I thought, okay, that's going to be interesting students in that school.
Right.
I kind of like that, if it's all good students. I mean, anybody can teach the good students.
Yeah.
And so I like working with the students that struggle.
There's a bit of character there as well, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, struggles and.
Yeah, so it's more interesting. It's
Yeah.
I don't like it easy. I don't like easy jobs. I don't like it. It bores me.
You need a challenge.
I need a challenge, and as a teacher, I don't get a kick out of the bureaucracy. I don't get a kick out of the politics. They're all awful. I'm not good at any of it, but I do like working with students that struggle, because there's something I can do with them, provided they want to. If they don't want to, then that's a different thing.
Yeah.
But the good students, I also have colleagues. They prefer working always with the good students, but I think that's not my thing. For me, it's I think very easy. The good students will always make it work. If it's a good curriculum, they'll make it work. If it's a bad curriculum, they will also make it work.
It doesn't matter how good you are at all in that case, in that context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the ones that struggle, I think that's where I always think I can make a bit of a difference.
So of the main things that you do, as far as I can tell, teaching, research, filmmaking. Yeah. Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
those are the three. Yeah. Which do you prefer most? And
filmmaking, of course.
Filmmaking, yeah.
I mean, I got into teaching when very late.
Yeah.
I was always teaching a little bit on the side, in between freelance project works, and that was always very exciting. But filmmaking, of course, that's the main passion, and I like that the best.
Should we talk a bit about that then?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
So you're a documentarian.
Yeah. Well, my background is pretty much in production.
Yep.
Drama or documentary. I got into documentary really late, simply because, as a teacher and you don't have a big budget, what can you do? Oh, I'm a documentary.
And probably not much time either. I guess time is limited.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so my research, I think the people that knew me when I was 17, 18, they're probably having a good laugh listening to me talking, research and PhD. I probably was the least academic person you could ever meet when I was 17. I was probably smoking too much weed and drinking too much and partying. So I was definitely not academic material back then. Right. So I got into all of that fairly late as well.
Okay. Did you find you have to reinvent yourselves at certain points of your life?
I probably reinvent myself every day.
Wow.
I think at least now. Back then, yeah, I think that there are a couple of moments where you really have to and that reinvention only happens because you're going through a difficult period, the challenges.
So you're forced to change something.
Yeah, and I think it's this realization that something is not right, and how do I deal with this? Yeah, and then adapt.
Yeah, do you know, I reinvented myself when I came to uni to study. I was a mature student, and I'd always been the class clown.
Okay.
I ended up on building sites just because that's what people do when they flunk school at the end.
Okay.
I went to a grammar school when I was younger, so
Okay.
I did well at a young age, got to grammar school, then it all kind of went downhill. So I was the class clown. I've got a group of school friends who I'm still really close with.
Okay.
So they all know me as the class clown. So it's
Okay.
really difficult to reinvent
Yeah.
yourself when you're in a group of people who see you one way and are
So
disappointed when you don't maintain that character, you know?
Yeah. No.
That's what I found. And then going to university made it easier because there was a whole group of new people who never knew me. I was older than all of them, so they looked up to me as someone who was more organised than them, which was laughable at the time. But I was that just because I was older, and you learn these things as you get older, and that gave me an opportunity to kind of reinvent myself as something a bit more professional, maybe slightly more professional. Anyway, you probably laugh at that.
I know, but I know exactly how you feel about that, because I think that was something that I also did in high school. I also was a bit the class clown. I think it was my way of dealing with the difficulties back home.
I was going to say it's probably to do with parents and divorce and
Yeah. So
rather than cry, you laugh.
Yeah. So that I think also because my mum was Dutch, I always thought there was something wrong with my mum or with us growing up in Germany, because in Germany everybody was so serious. But my mum was funny. She always had a good joke somehow, and I thought, why is my mum funny and nobody else here is?
So that's not just a stereotype that Germans are very serious.
Well, no, I think it is a stereotype that probably applies to the area that I grew up, which is the Black Forest, which is beautiful. I love it there, and the food is amazing, but the people are so serious.
Is that part of Bavaria?
No, Bavaria is a little bit more southwest.
Oh, okay.
Southeast. That part is more is closer to France and Switzerland. So they have really good food. I mean, way better than the stuff in the Netherlands or even here. But the people are so serious.
Hey, what did you say about our food?
I'm not saying it's bad if you know where to find it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So the seriousness, that's I think true for that part of Germany. The moment you go into the Rhine area towards Holland, Cologne, Düsseldorf, people are already a lot more fun there. And northern Germany is also totally different to southern Germany. I think it's just the accent. The accent sounds very serious, and people, the Anglo-Saxon world, when they hear German speakers, like, oh, it's so serious.
Yeah. Just as all French people seem romantic.
Exactly, and they're not really.
Yeah.
And I think it's also, the people like Nietzsche, those philosophers, they created this image of deep German philosophical thoughts, like the longer you stare into the abyss, at some point the abyss will stare back at you. And they think, God, that's so German. And my version of it is a bit more like, the longer you smile at the pancake, eventually the pancake will smile back to you. I think you can also look at it like this.
Where did you get that one from? Is that original quote from
I just came
Fritz?
up with that 2 days ago.
Yeah, that's lovely. I like that.
For my dad, I sent it to because my dad is like such a German philosophical kind of Jungian.
Really?
And everything has to be analyzed.
Really?
So, oh God.
Is your dad academically inclined? Does he?
No, he's a medical doctor, but he also then specialized into psychotherapy.
Right.
And at 85, he's still working. But he's one of those psychotherapists where he helps other people and he can't help himself.
Yeah.
To a certain extent.
Yeah, but that's so true of all occupations. I think I used to be a chippy when I was, a builder. So my house, the doors, the hinges needed sorting, but I would never do it because you don't want to work when you go home, do you?
But I think you have also really. I think there are some similarities in your life because, I also struggled to finish with high school. Right? So I was bumming around a little bit, and I had to learn all these things like you. I worked on construction sites. I worked in bars.
Did some of that.
I did all of these kind of things. And so I learned how to survive on my own. That was a tough one, though, because my mum really spoiled me.
Yeah, no, it is. It is part of growing up, I suppose, for most people. But I think, yeah, I don't know. I've just been reflecting on it a lot in the last few years. As I say, now I have children of my own, and I often think to myself, my mum and dad split up. My mum raised us, and my dad lacked interest, and still does now, even though we've got grandkids. And I just think, I can't imagine ever doing that.
No, I think
if my children grow up and have children, I can't imagine not wanting to be part of their lives, you know. So
same here.
I'm reflecting on it a lot, and
Why do you
and
think
how it's impacted me. I think he had struggles as well. His parents, I think they died when he was relatively young. Both his parents, maybe before he was 20, maybe they both died.
Okay.
I think one maybe when he was 8, and I think when his it would have been his dad died. He was basically sent to school and told, don't think about it.
Ah, okay.
Which is going to cause attachment issues and stuff.
Okay.
So, you know, I understand that stuff, but it's still hard to take, you know?
I get the same sometimes with my dad. My dad, he found his way back to us. So there was a time when his partner back then wouldn't really want him to have much contact with us. That has changed because his girlfriend now, she's very open, but he always, you know, he was the youngest in his family. That's my explanation for his behavior. So he was used to being the little boy out of 6, and everybody was always doing stuff for him. And he's like he has the little boy problem. You know, like my aunt, she's
Peter Pan.
Peter Pan.
Yeah.
My aunt is a few years younger than him, but she can do email, she can do WhatsApp, she can do all of that. With my dad, it's kind of like a form of benign censorship because his girlfriend has to do all of this. And I never really know if my messages get there.
Or who's responding.
Yeah, and you know, he's always saying like, "Oh, I'm too stupid. I can't do any of this." I said, "God, for God's sake, Dad. I mean, your sister can do it. You can."
Yeah,
do it.
it's like a learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness.
Yeah.
Because he's always the little boy that's been helped before. Yeah, so, and I think that's kind of like explaining it to me. So how his behavior is. But then I also go back to the moment in my own life, and maybe that's the question you have for your dad. You know, like, am I going to be the victim of this, or am I going to do something about this?
Yeah.
You know, at some point when you decide to do something about that's a big life changing moment. You can blame all the things that go around you on other people or things or events, and I think that's how I also got into Buddhist philosophy. You can start looking at these things as part of you. This is not an event or a person against me and separate from me, but this is something right here, right now, that's a part of me, and I need to deal with this.
Okay.
So, and by almost embracing it every moment, then that is a much better way to live for me. So that brings me also more back into the here and now, and not so much thinking about what will I do tomorrow, or what will happen in a week, or what should I worry about in a year from now. Or I also then don't think all the time about what happened to me yesterday or a year ago, maybe 10 years ago. So by looking at reality in this way, it brings me into the here and now, and I enjoy every single moment like that. Yeah? Even when I walk through Bournemouth, I mean, Bournemouth is always an interesting place because Philippines. I mean, every street corner in the Philippines, when you drive with a taxi, you can see the entire bandwidth of human misery and happiness right there on one street corner. Like, how is this even possible? You know, we don't have that here. And you can look at it like this: this is disgusting, or wow, what is this? So I think it's a way of looking at the world by just realizing that none of this is separate. This is part of. Maybe you can even say that all of this is a shared form of hallucination that we have to somehow get through. You know, so and I think that for me that works very well.
That whole sort of consciousness idea, and what is consciousness, and
what is consciousness? You know,
I don't know. I was asking you.
Yeah.
I hope you knew.
Well, I think because of my dad's background, I always had an interest in Jungian ideas of the collective unconscious. You know, something that we share, and it's actually based in solid empirical science. Jung analyzed thousands of dreams, and he realized that there's a lot of shared symbolism going on in there. So he came up with
even across cultures and
across cultures. And so I think that is very interesting, because that means, but it also, you can easily slide into this kind of like metaphysical dimension that becomes esoteric, and that's also not what I'm all about. So I appreciate science. I'm into science. I like working scientifically, but I'm also not an atheist. I don't believe, I grew up as a Catholic.
Okay.
But I don't really believe in the dogma of the church. I never did. But I also felt that, the things that, for example, Jesus said, they made total sense. I mean, really, if you think about it, there's nothing wrong with it, except what the church turned that whole dogma into. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I find there's a whole bunch of people that are then repelled by that, and they become complete atheists.
When you say the dogma, you mean like the rituals and the kind of not the discipline, but the overt kind of what am I trying to say?
When it becomes a power
control.
Thing. Yeah, control. When it becomes a power thing.
Right.
And I think in the Philippines it's so obvious in the Philippines, like the Catholic Church there is not only about religion, it also has a lot of political power.
Right.
And I always think that if Jesus came back right now, he probably would travel to the Vatican and sell everything off. So I think, I don't have any faith. And then, of course, there are all these revelations about child abuse in the church. That doesn't make any sense. So I just won't submit to this kind of power play. I think, and so in the last couple of years, I got really attracted to Buddhism, but that's more like a philosophy. It's not. I don't even think of it as a religion, because that just seems to make much more sense.
Yeah.
In Catholicism, there's this idea there's a God over there and you have to worship him. But
and him as well is an interesting concept, right?
Exactly.
The God is as a male sort of thing.
And in Buddhism, it's more like all of us can become enlightened even right now. So we're on an equal footing here, right there. Much more interesting. So the philosophy, and they talk a lot about consciousness. So they have eye consciousness, smell, mouth, so these 5 senses, and then they have the mental consciousness, which is about thinking, like mental, just thinking about stuff, science. But then they also have something they call the afflictive consciousness, depending on which school of Buddhism, because there's a whole bunch of them. And that's kind of like a form of consciousness that we use to find our way around this reality. Like we label this as a camera, we label this as a microphone, this is a coffee. But if I take this apart, then if I put flowers in it, then it's not a coffee cup anymore. Then the same thing is suddenly a vase. But it's the same thing. Yeah. Or if I take it apart, it becomes plastic. If I take that apart, it becomes atoms. And you can do this ad infinitum, and suddenly then you realize there is nothing. There isn't anything here.
Yeah, right.
Because all we do is label it. It's a label.
Yeah.
So suddenly then you get this weird sense of unreality thinking, so what is any of this?
Yeah, it's all just clumps of atoms.
Atoms.
And some of them are clumped together and some of them are not.
Yeah, and atoms are
or more densely packed, shall we say.
Yeah, and atoms are mostly empty space.
Yeah, true, yeah.
And then when you go even further, then it becomes quarks, and when you go further, it becomes vibrating particles, and then it's like literally nothing.
It's just a wave, isn't it, at the bottom or something?
It's like, so the question becomes, what is this? So that's why they call it this afflictive consciousness, because what it does, it labels things so we can find our way around reality, because it is still real, even though logically we realize that maybe it's not even anything. We have to deal with it.
Have you ever heard that concept of a solid structure?
Yeah.
And the fact that your fist doesn't just go straight through it is just by a series of probabilities that all of the particles that make up the solid structure are all pushing back in the correct direction at the right time. But there is a very slight chance that my fist could go straight through that sofa.
Yeah. So that is, I think that is really the same kind of thinking. Same kind of thinking, that basically all of this, at the end of the day, if you really think about it with this kind of logic, and that's why I like science, it's nothing. And it's interesting, quantum physics is coming to very similar conclusions than this kind of Buddhist philosophy, where they already, I think 2000 years, they came up with the idea of partless particles that are at the foundation of everything, which is that's really, really interesting. So I find, and then they have another form of consciousness, which what they call the mind of all basis, which is neutral, and that's where they keep kind of like karmic experiences, which is then their idea of rebirth and all that kind of stuff.
What did you call that, sorry?
The mind of all, the mind basis of all. So that's basically, and I, my understanding, at least that's how I look at it, that could be something like Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, where we are all connected somehow. So where, from that consciousness, for example, reality arises. So when I talk to you or when I see this camera, this is all coming from the same source. And that's how I understand that this is not separate from me. This is made up of the same stuff that I made up, and it's arising at the same time. So I can see it with my eyes and I can hear it, but it's not a separate thing. It doesn't exist on its own. It comes from the same source that connects all of us. And that's what they call that. And I find that I still don't know if I understood all of that correctly, but it makes a lot more sense to me.
Do you find it hard to embody this in your day-to-day life? I was listening to a podcast recently, I can't even remember who it was now, but they were saying that they understand these theories and they feel like it's kind of true, this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But then the trick of the reality that our senses sort of creates is so overwhelming that they instantly, within a couple of hours, slip back into day-to-day routines, and everything just feels the way it was before they had this kind of enlightenment or whatever. Do you find the same thing?
Yeah, I find the same thing. I think what I find is, so I have this meditation practice, which is not regular. I'd like to have it more regular, but I think when I manage to, people sometimes say, why do you meditate? Why do you not want to think? And I say, well, if I didn't want to think, I'd be watching a lot of American TV. It's not about not wanting to think, It's about calming my mind and then really just creating this space where I can experience these things.
Who says that anyway? Who criticizes you in that way?
Oh, my students. Do
they?
Yeah, they go like, oh, we hear you're meditating. Why do you not want to think? And I'm getting that.
It sounds like they're just trying to test you, to be honest.
I know. So, and they always have a laugh when I say it's American TV. But yes, it's not easy. But I get these moments, at least I hope it's going in that direction where I have these glimpses of what this is all about. And it could be small stuff like just walking through the town with maybe some music on, and then you suddenly have not just this rational explanation about reality, but you can feel it. I think when you get this feeling, then I think I'm a little bit closer to that, but I also know I have a long way to go.
When you get that feeling, does it feel quite emotionally overwhelming?
I think it can be. Sometimes if it's the right moment, it gives you like, teary-eyed. It's like, why am I feeling that? But I think feelings are key to all of this. And if you ignore them, then that's a problem. I think for a long time, especially in my work life, maybe around your age, a lot of the feelings going back to my childhood, but also other things. If you ignore them, that's always a problem. And what I did for a while, I just escaped into work. I pretended like I didn't have these feelings. But they come back to haunt you. And the longer you ignore it, the worse it gets.
Right.
So when I was 45, that was an unpleasant part. That you have to work, you can't ignore them. But if you follow these feelings, they will take you into the right direction.
What happened at that age then? What was it?
Well, I think that's sort of like when I realized I was repeating many of the mistakes of my parents. I worked myself kind of like a bit into a dead end. I was like on the other side of the planet, far away from friends and family, so I can get pretty lonely. So, and unlike here, there is no kind of like sick leave thing going on over there. You have to work through it. So that was a tough moment.
In the Philippines, was this?
Singapore also.
Singapore, right.
Yeah. So I was really glad to be able then to come back and work in Europe. But the bulk of that kind of self-reflection and working through it, that really happened over there. And I was glad that Arlene was around for that.
Yeah, right.
You know, you have to have. I think that's, if you then have a partner that's not only your wife but also your best friend, I think is the best thing that can happen to you.
And 19 years later, you're still going strong. Has your relationship gone through different phases? Do you see it like that?
Yeah, of course. I think working together, but I would say nothing terrible, awful. You know, there was a moment where we were teaching too many courses together, and then you never stop talking about work on the weekend.
Yeah.
So we had to get that right. But I'd say that's it. That's about the only thing.
I suppose that the fact that you can reflect on that and change it is important, because I think a lot of people go through life not really reflecting in that way.
No, I think you have to have a relationship. Now we're talking about partners, you know, where you can talk about anything. You need to be able to talk about anything. If you can't do that, or if you feel like there is something you want to talk about but you can't put your finger on, now you have to be able to talk about anything. Otherwise, it's not going to last, I think. You know, and you have to go. I mean, science is amazing. I think science explains the reality that we label. Anything to do with cause and effect. Everything that exists in this world, in this physical world, only exists because cause of effect. You exist because of your parents. Your children exist because of you, but everything will at some point cease to exist. That's totally normal. There is nothing in this world that's permanent. So some of the things that are permanent, for me at least, are not necessarily metaphysical. Even my relationship with my wife, it's actually, if you think about it, it's extremely hard to find anything that will last forever. You know, in Catholicism, they have this idea about the soul, and that'll be for all eternity. But I don't think that exists either. If there is such a thing as rebirth, then you're reborn as a different person. You're not going to be reborn as the last one, because then the goal would be to become a better person. If you become a better person, then you can't be the same person that you were last time.
Have you seen the film Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Yeah. Last year with Chris.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
With Chris, and I told Chris, Chris, that movie's just like you. She said, no, I don't think so.
In what way?
Because Chris is also a bit like the person that wants to do everything everywhere all at once.
Oh, really? Right.
Yeah, but I think it's a kind of philosophy.
Yeah.
So it's extremely hard. If if you think about yourself, Tom, you as Tom, where in your body is Tom?
Yeah, no, it's nowhere.
Is it in your? You can't find it.
No, and if you lose a part of you, are you still Tom? Is it in the brain?
I don't know.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. I talk to my dad about it often. What is the brain? Is that where we are? Traditional science says that's where everything is. But my dad and I, we think the brain is just a giant antenna that connects all of us, like a Wi-Fi antenna.
Well, this is sort of what people are saying. Some of the theories about this consciousness thing, isn't it? Is that it's actually something that connects us all in that way.
Yeah.
And it's outside of the body.
I think that's the best explanation that I've had.
But I do wonder if there are some questions that we will never answer, despite us aiming for them.
That's why we're here. We can only explain things in this reality with the tools of this reality. It would be impossible. I think it's just impossible for us to try and explain experience outside this reality, because we can't look at it from the outside. But your mind, who you are, the person that you were before we started this interview, is already going to be a different person after this interview. So everything changes. It's really impossible to find. And I think that's the one thing I also like about this Buddhist philosophy. If you can't find it, if it's unfindable, then it doesn't really exist. And then I'm thinking, fuck.
Nothing exists.
Yeah. So then you can easily go into this
nihilism. Yeah. But was that a German concept as well, the nihilism? Probably.
Probably. The Germans, they were totally into that sort of thing. But the reality, that doesn't mean this still exists. It's still here. You still have to deal with it. Even though logic at some point will take you to this conclusion that none of it exists.
I think ultimately then you have to come back to sort of a pragmatic view in terms of what exists to us humans and deal with that almost.
And I think karma does that. Karma gives that reason. So anything you do, whatever you do, it will have an influence on other people and other things, and it leaves an imprint. And so the fact that we're sitting here, that I'm talking to you and you're talking to me, I think that's karmic experience. For example, you get to see, and sometimes on a good day, you notice these things. Like the other day, a colleague of mine who was also here before Chris arrived, she was telling me over breakfast that her mom was suddenly sick, and she was in hospital. She had a mild stroke, and while she was talking about it, a bit emotional, phone rings. Her sister's on the phone, calling her. It's like, what are the odds that happens at that time? And so these are the kind of small coincidences that Jung would call maybe synchronicity. But I think they're also coincidences that are not directly linked causally, but they have meaning. And I think that for me, that is something reality wants to say something.
Do you think that's quite a human-centric idea, though, that we are? It almost puts us on a pedestal as if we're more important than anything else in the universe because things are happening relating to us.
No, I think
for a reason or something. Or
I think yes, you could read it like that. But I also think it happens with everything. Everything is like that. It also happens with animals.
And wildlife and planetary stuff.
I think everything is connected in this way.
Interesting.
And I think we're just a small, tiny little part of it. And we just happen to have a bit more of a consciousness to understand that tiny piece of reality around us. But I'm certain, considering how gigantic this universe is, we'll never understand all of this.
Do you think there's other life out there?
Oh, I'm convinced of it. From a scientific perspective, just from a probability perspective, it's unimaginable that there can't be.
It depends how rare life is, though. If we're going with the theory that all life on Earth came from a cell originally, or whatever was. That's a question that's impossible to answer in my mind as well. How did life come from nothing? But anyway, if that is really, really rare, that is.
But look at how. Who was it? This God, I forgot his name. He's this lovely British scientist who was always on TV talking about
Brian
this.
Cox.
Yeah, him. Yeah. I think he is really reasonably skeptic. But when he explains how gigantic this universe is and how many billions and trillions of planets and galaxies, I can't imagine there isn't any life out there.
Yeah, I think I thought like that as well. I don't know. I flip-flopped really. I think I probably still am on that side. There must be life, but it depends how rare that spark of life is.
Would love to meet them.
It would be great, wouldn't it, in our lifetime? Yeah. Well, it might be great. Who knows? Who knows what would happen?
But then,
if they're more intelligent than us, it might end up, what we've done to animals.
Yeah, or other people.
Yes.
So
exactly.
But on the other hand, if you just go by mathematics, what is the probability that in this giant universe, even two humans end up meeting each other? It only happens to be we happen to be on that one small planet.
Oh, I see what you're saying. As opposed to just floating in randomly, distributed.
Mathematically, that would be like impossible.
Well, that's a cause and effect thing as well, isn't it? Because I often think I've heard people say things like. Think how crazy it is that we're on this planet and we can drink the water, which is the most abundant liquid. But it's actually the other way around, isn't it? Yeah. We've evolved to drink the water because it's there.
Yeah, exactly.
So in that same way, we're all on the planet because it couldn't be any other way. Because do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it would be.
We wouldn't have survived very long if we were floating randomly in space. I
know. With no water, I think I would be worried about water if I was floating in space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right, we went off on a massive tangent here because I started talking about your documentary work. I wanted to talk about some of your documentary stuff.
Okay, documentary stuff.
One of the things you brought up actually about Catholicism, is that the right word, in the Philippines?
Yeah.
You made a documentary about that, didn't you?
Yeah, I did because I got interested in a law that they were trying to pass in the Philippines for the longest time, I think 18 years, that would allow couples or young people or anybody to actually use artificial contraception methods like condoms, anti-baby pill, that kind of stuff. And because the Catholic Church, for the longest time, was totally against it, and they would stop the passing of this bill. And if you have been in the Philippines and you've taken, for example, a cab ride, you might run into a cab driver who has 13 children and who is struggling to pay the bill. Yeah? So I'm thinking, that's why we made that documentary. And it was really interesting. I mean, there's also this perception that the Philippines is a really poor country. It's really not.
Really?
No, it's not. It's a very unjust and unequal country. So we went to this hospital where there were about 60, 70 women give birth per day in that hospital.
Wow.
And once a week, a woman bleeds to death because it's just a really busy hospital. Correct. And in the ward, there's typically 2 to 3 women in a bed. Yeah. So and it's like
in one bed.
Yeah, and it's like one big room. It's not like even you don't have your room. It's like one big room with maybe 50, 60, 70 beds in there, something like that. And it's like noisy and people are chattering and they don't look unhappy. They're having babies, like literally like right there. Mm. And they stay there maybe 24 hours and then they go home.
Wow.
So that's it. You go there, you spend some time with another woman in another bed. That sounds not so bad, actually. And then you go and give birth and then you go home. Right? And up the road, maybe an hour's drive, there's St. Luke's Hospital. That's a hospital that we don't have here. You'd be happy to have a hospital here as part of the NHS. They have a presidential suite. They have an ambassador suite. They have jacuzzis in that suite. There is no queue.
Wow.
We interviewed somebody, it was empty, no queue. There is restaurants on the ground floor. There's valet parking. I mean, I'd love to, we should, that's a hospital to have. And that's where the politicians go,
right?
And the people that have money. Mm. So the Philippines is not poor. I don't know, San Miguel beer?
Yeah.
That's a Filipino brand.
Mm.
So the San Miguel Food Corporation is a giant corporation. And so what we have here in Europe that we always underappreciate is, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but we have a much better level of equality. Mm. Maybe not so much here in the UK. I think here still what I call Oxbridge is a bit of an issue. At some point you run against the old boys club here, network. Holland also has that, but not to the same extent. Mm. It's a little bit more flat. Germany also. But in the Philippines, it's run by clans. The country is run by, it's not democratic, it's really run by clans. Right. If you're part of the Lopez clan, you might end up working in media. If you're part of the Ayala clan, you run huge malls. I mean, I always say that, and maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but you can literally walk from one end of Manila to the other and never leave a mall. That's how many malls they have.
Oh, really?
It's incredible. I mean, what do you do on a Sunday afternoon with your kids? You go for a walk somewhere, maybe
try and get out, yeah.
Beach, somewhere in nature.
Yeah,
people don't do that. They go to a mall.
Really?
Yeah. Sunday afternoon is morning, you go to the church, then you go to the mall.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Because
are they happy with that, or is it just something they feel?
There's aircon in there.
Oh, right. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, but
and probably less flies and things, I guess.
Yeah, because I mean, I'd rather go to the beach, right? So that would be equivalent. No, they go to the mall, but they always go as a family. So the sense of family, I really enjoy that over there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so
I feel like that sense of family is eroding in the UK at least.
Same in Germany.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when Princess died on that day, and I was watching the commentary. I was living in Kensington, Chelsea, and I was watching it on TV. And suddenly the commentator went like, "Oh, royal family, typical German dysfunctional family." I said, "Oh God, he's so right." So sense of family. I think German and British culture is very similar. I think the only thing that I would say is maybe different from the UK perspective. I think Brits always feel they have to compete somehow with Germany. I always hear like, "Oh, Germany is doing this better, or doing that better," or it's like.
Particularly in football, it feels like. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's probably one of those cases where England feel like Germany is their biggest rival, but Germany don't care.
Yeah, no, they don't. Really
Germany aren't
care.
that bothered.
No, they're not bothered. They just want to play football.
Because I guess you have, I don't know, maybe
No,
Denmark or...
No, I think you really put that on the spot. I mean, just living in the UK, watching German and England play football was always a headache for me.
Yeah.
Because for the German side, when you read the German press, it's really only about football.
Yeah.
But the British press, it's not only football, and it becomes a World War II thing.
Yeah,
like,
it is, it is.
Yeah, so, and then I think that's like, ugh. Yeah, but
it's like some sort of nationalistic pride still lingering, or something.
Yeah, and I'm not into any of that. I mean, I'm not saying Germany doesn't have that either. And they also have that, but wherever I am, I always stay away from that. I don't like it. It's not my thing.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I have also family in Spain, and I love evenings in Spain where I can sit outside. And when I go to Spain, I don't stay in these kind of like ghettos for Germans or Dutch people or English people. I speak Spanish, so I hang out with Spanish people as much as I can.
Yeah, I like that you call it ghetto.
Yeah, because it really is a ghetto.
They have these little kind of villages, don't they?
Enclaves.
Yeah. My nan actually moved out there, and then my granddad died, so she now moved back. But my mum now owns a villa in one of those sort of places where there's an Irish bar, on the corner and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I can't. I mean, no point living there for that, And
well, they're just going there for the weather, frankly, aren't they?
Yeah, they're just for the weather, and they bring their own culture. But I just like sitting outside in one of these Spanish cafes in the evening, and there's kids running around, and the family in Spain has different value. Same in the Philippines. Family in Spain, I miss that. I missed that when I grew up in Germany. I missed that when I lived in the UK. I didn't miss it in Spain. It felt like normal to me. I don't know, maybe that's a previous life or something. And the Philippines, it felt totally normal to me. I love having children around. I really like kids.
Yeah.
But, in a good way.
Just to clarify, thanks for that. So what other documentaries? You've got something out recently that intrigued me. I saw the trailer on your website of you emerging from water with mud on your face. What was that all about?
Okay, that was an experimental thing, because I mean I like technology also.
Yeah.
And over the years, cameras have become so tiny. If you look back at the history of film, the Bell Howell camera, that was like a huge giant monster, and then sound came along, and you had to put the camera into a boot where the camera operator nearly died of heat stroke because it was so hot in there. Wow. And then the 16mm camera came along, French New Wave, equipment became small and portable. And the last couple of years, there's this Osmo Cam, this Osmo Pocket 3, which is really, I mean, I don't think it could be any tinier, any smaller, otherwise I couldn't press any buttons.
I mean, the camera itself is, for people watching, it's about that big. It's probably the size of the end of your thumb, maybe, the camera. And then it's on a gimbal stick, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a gimbal stick.
Small gimbal stick.
Yeah. So I experimented
maybe 6 inches long or something.
And so that was just an experimental thing.
The footage looks great on it as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. If you know how to do this camera properly, you get some really good stuff out of it. And the theme was a Giri in Spain. That's the theme. A Giri is what Spanish people call a foreigner going to Spain as a tourist or living there, but not really adapting to Spanish culture.
So what we were just talking about.
Exactly.
So is there a bit of irony, because I think it looked like you were the person, but actually you do embrace the culture.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
I do.
Right.
So that was it. But I also thought that camera is just I mean, I can get 200 frames per second at 1920. No, actually that's 4K with the new camera, if I'm not mistaken. And then when you shoot 4K, I always deliver in 1920, 1080 because that's, I think, good enough for delivery. But when you shoot 4K, then you suddenly have all these options of cropping.
Yeah.
And the Osmo 3 has really good sound. It has 4 microphones.
How much are you being paid for this endorsement?
Oh, nothing. Nothing. So I shot an entire documentary on that last year, coming back here last year, that I called Brexit Field Trip. So these kind of things are experimenting with technology, But of course, the most important part is still the content. It has to be a good story.
I saw a clip on it must have been your Twitter or Instagram, of you flying a drone, and then it had the captions, the cliched things that people do with their drone. That really made me laugh. And get ready, we're going to cut on the beat. Cut as the music dropped, you cut.
I know.
And then arbitrary shot towards over the water, to create a sense of meaning, even though there is none, or something is completely meaningless.
I know.
That really made me laugh.
Everybody has a drone now, so everything, whatever you look at, there's always a drone shot in there. So no, I had just a bit of fun playing with that drone.
Is that a drone you own yourself?
No, the school bought one.
Okay.
So we have a couple of those. But it's the same company that I won't mention now because they're not paying me.
Well, maybe they will after this.
Should ask them. But I think that that technology is just great.
Yeah.
So when I left film school, we were dreaming of this stuff, and now we have it. And now I think anybody can make a film now even on your phone. You can make it on your phone.
Yeah, really.
And I think now it turns out that everybody could make this thing called film. It's just very few of us are very good at telling a story.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, So I still have a lot to learn. I'm not the best storyteller.
And now it's like there's no excuse. You can't hide behind, I can't get the equipment.
No. And, my students, I have so many students that buy all these expensive cameras, and somehow they think magically they'll be suddenly great storytellers. Yeah, they come back with pretty pictures, but they can't tell a story.
It is hard.
Yeah, it's really
hard.
hard.
A good story.
It's tough.
Yeah.
And with the arrival of AI, I think that's going to be even more interesting how that will turn out.
I'm glad you brought AI up because I love this topic.
You do?
In general.
You do?
I love talking about AI.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think it's interesting. I'm not certain if it is as groundbreaking as people think it is.
I think at the moment, I think that that term AI has been stolen and is now a marketing thing. So I think it's quickly blurred what AI actually means. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not even actually certain we actually have artificial intelligence yet. Do you know what I mean?
I agree. Where do you think this is going to go? What's your take on this?
I'm a little bit doomsday about it, to be honest.
You do? Yeah.
I think ultimately, and I'm not talking in maybe the 10 years, it might be 50, 100 years.
Yeah.
I just think that we will probably end up creating robots that can self-replicate.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast yesterday actually about this on the Lex Fridman podcast.
Okay.
They're creating technology that a small robot which can create a slightly larger robot, and then that larger robot can create a slightly larger robot. So by doing this, you can grow bigger and bigger stuff.
Yeah.
So this is, humans are prodding the how far they can push this stuff. So I just can't imagine that in the next 100 years we're not going to have robots that can self-replicate that are also way more intelligent than us.
I agree.
And if you've ever watched any films about artificial intelligence, I just can't see it going well. But I also, I'm not so set in my ways that I would like to be convinced otherwise, And I do think that for a while it'll be great tools that will come out of it for humanity. But I just think all it takes is one person for it to get into the wrong hands of, and it, could be, and that's going to happen. Yeah, frankly, how could you stop it?
Yeah, this, I have the same thoughts, and for me, it goes back to also this idea about cause and effect. Eventually, humans will cease to exist. There is no way around that. Even if we manage to exist until the end of time of this universe, if we could make it that long, which is still a few billion years, at that point we will cease to exist.
Yeah.
But I think we'll probably,
unless we traverse into a parallel universe.
I was thinking about that. I was thinking, we have to figure out how to jump into another universe.
But this is a very philosophical question. When did time begin and will it end? It's just an unanswerable question. How could something have come from nothing?
I think Richard Dawkins has an interesting idea there.
Okay.
No.
Are you going to share it, or are you just leave it there?
No, that's it. Look up Richard Dawkins everywhere now. So there's this idea. There's the Big Bang.
Yeah.
Right. And then universe expands infinitely until it all matter has gone. But now there's this other idea where at the very beginning of just before the Big Bang, all matter is so condensely compressed, it's unimaginably hot, and there's literally no matter in it. But then that raises the question, then there's also no time. If there's no matter, there's no time. And it's so hot, it's a state of existence where it's kind of like the exact opposite of what you would have at the end of the universe, where it's infinitely cold and all matter has gone because it's been swallowed up by all of these black holes. So there's no more matter.
Right.
So that the idea is the universe forgets what temperature is all like. So infinitely cold, it's basically the same as infinitely hot. And that state of existence is the exact same thing as at the beginning. And then it's just another big bang.
Wow. But
so it's kind of like doing this all the time.
Yeah, but I suppose I can kind of understand that. And I think when you said matter is so densely packed, there's no time. Do you mean really space? Without space, there is no time, right?
It's so hot, there's no matter. And if there's no matter, then there's no time.
Okay. But it still begs the question, when did that cycle begin? There will always be that question, you know?
Yeah, that's exact. So the only thing they basically are proposing is instead of doing this, and that's it, now it's doing this.
It's like monkeys clapping the...
and that kind of like is, that takes me back to Buddhism. It's kind of like the idea of eternal, you know, you're on this wheel of karma that's always going round. You know, we're condemned to. So even if you live through this universe, maybe you get into the next one, and it goes on forever. And that would be like, I don't like that.
You don't want to live forever.
No. So how did we get to that now?
I don't know. I was just thinking. I was just trying to think. How are we going to get back on track here? What were we talking about?
Maybe we qualify for ADHD treatment.
I think so. But I love these conversations. Oh, it's AI that we were talking about.
Wasn't it? AI. For me, AI. I think I agree with you. It's a marketing slang now. I mean, just try and have a conversation with Google Assistant. That's kind of like, no, that's not AI. That's like talking to an idiot.
ChatGPT is similar.
Yeah, half of the time it will just like not do the things. Like I've got Google Assistant in the house.
Yeah.
It never does what I'm asking it to do. Like
it's the beginning of the disobedience.
Like turn on the lights and then it turns the lights off. It's like they can't hear. And then I say, Google, you're an idiot. You can't hear me. And I say, oh, don't talk to me like this. Really?
Does it say that to you?
Yeah.
But the real question is, Fritz, is do you do what Google Assistant asks of you?
We will.
Yeah.
If we get a German programmer in it, we will make you do things.
Yeah, I mean, AI is definitely a marketing slang right now.
Yeah.
Do you think? So do you think artificial intelligence doesn't exist yet? Do you think we're on the path to intelligence?
Yeah.
And what do you think intelligence even is?
I think it'll be interesting when there's a couple of there is what's his name? He's talking about that one moment when this one computer will be smarter than all of us. I forgot what it's called, but I think.
Oh, is it Ray Kurzweil?
Ray Kurzweil,
yeah, the singularity.
Yeah, the singularity.
Yeah.
But I think for true consciousness to exist, it needs to have a physical body. So I think they're starting to build these robots that you mentioned, and when they have physical bodies, then they will have experiences like taste and sight and hearing. And that's a form of consciousness that they will have. When you ask ChatGPT something now, like what's an apple, it'll look up a database and say that's an apple. But when an AI or a robot like that can tell you what an apple tastes and feels like because they have touched them, and then that's a different thing. Then we're talking about an experience. Is it really intelligent? At that level, I think we're not far from that if once these AIs have actual physical bodies. So I think a physical body is crucial to have some form of awareness.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but that's
so that you can interact with the world, other than because ChatGPT interacts with just the internet, I suppose you could say, or text-based stuff, doesn't it?
And databases, But if a robot has an experience, if it knows what it is like to walk up the stairs rather than just getting that from a database, then that's an experience. So when they have these physical experience, I think that's when that's going. I think that's how I think of it as something that's going to be interesting to see what happens. And then I think that the next thing is when these physical robots. Right now we see them as, like we all have Terminator in our mind, right? There's this Terminator.
Well, it's iRobot for me,
iRobot, yeah. So, but, eventually when people, and in Japan it has happened already. Like the little robot dogs they had a few years ago, the Sony ones.
Yeah.
People got so attached to them, they don't make them anymore. When they stopped functioning, they gave them burials.
Wow.
So that's, I mean, that's an emotional attachment to a machine.
Is that just a social media thing though? They wanted to do the burial to put it online to get likes and stuff, or is it a genuine?
No, they really did that.
They mourned over the
They
loss
mourned them, and they also there was a market because Sony stopped making them, so there was a market to get second-hand parts to repair them. So I think that there's the physical body part, and I think when people start thinking of that robot as somebody that they're attached to, regardless of whether they have consciousness or not, or awareness, if you fall in love with one of these robots, I think that's another important step, because some people might say, no, it's a robot, and they won't fall in love with that. Other people might not think that. They might actually fall in love with that.
Well, I think we're quite easily fooled, aren't we, really? Yeah. It's just, at the moment, I think that almost the design is... ChatGPT is an example, I think, where it's just... it's designed to fool us into thinking it knows what it's saying. Do you know what I mean? That's almost like inherent in its design.
Yeah.
To mimic a human so that we feel like it feels human to us.
But then again, if we think, a moment ago we spoke about afflictive consciousness. Are we not also fooled to think that that camera exists by itself when it actually doesn't? So what does it mean? Is it important if you are fooled or not, if you have an actual experience about feelings for a physical robot?
Very true. And I mean, I suppose the same thing could be leveled to any other human that you know. You don't know for sure. I don't know for sure that you're not a robot.
Yeah.
But I believe you're not. So, and that's all that matters.
I think, the fact that I'm German makes it likely I'm a robot.
You are slightly more robotic, yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think in principle that's the same thing. How do I actually know I'm talking to a human being?
Yeah.
I mean, I assume that it's very, very likely. And with a robot, it's probably a lot less likely. But there will be a point when
that will merge.
When they can't make that difference anymore. They will hate them or like them or whatever it is. So I think that's one thing. So the physical part and that kind of reaction from society. And then, of course, I think there's another level, which is, I assume you're a real human being with awareness. But what if at some point these things also have that? Then the question is, how do we know that? And even if we let's say we can ascertain that, then what kind of rights will we give them?
I was just thinking the same thing, yeah.
Yeah. So if I fall in love with,
or the question should be, what kind of rights will they give us for it? Keep coming back to that.
Yeah. So the term,
I do wonder how we will ensure that we don't become enslaved. And I think people probably laugh when I say that sort of thing. But all it would take is one baddie, let's say, simplest, to breed a load of robots who are inclined to try and take over the world. And what's going to stop?
I think that's one. I think what will happen probably more likely is that we will become part of them before they enslave us. So I think we will become like cyborgs. Instead of I always think, right now we have mobile phones.
Yeah.
Right? But maybe in 50 years it'll be just an implant in our brain.
I think that's probably likely, and I think the companies, Apple and Co, know this as well, because the wearable tech at the moment is like the middle step between that, and then people will say, what, I'm getting fed up of wearing this thing on my wrist. Can't I just have an implant? And I think is it Neuralink, Elon Musk?
Yep,
they're doing implants and stuff.
So I think that's something that will happen, and it could very well be that these physical robots that we just talked about, that they will never happen, but that they will become part of our bodies.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so that something like that.
Is that going to also cause massive inequalities, because people who can afford these first will suddenly become potentially super intelligent or super great at everything? That
I think it's like when you look at this kind of technology emerging, it's always the rich people who get to play with this first, and they pay a lot of money to do it. But then technology usually becomes cheap and affordable for everybody else.
Very true, yeah.
I think that the same will happen with AI and any of these things. So there's always going to be this inequality. As long as we have capitalism, in this way, there will always be rich people who will get it first. You know, and I think that doesn't matter if that's AI or something else. I think that takes us to a political discussion about capitalism and the role of capitalism. You know,
We can go there if you want to.
yeah, we can. You know, so
I've got a friend who I often debate this with.
Yeah.
He's on the other side. You know, I think he overwhelmingly thinks capitalism is a good thing and probably the
Right.
best system that we've created so far. Which, to be honest, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with.
Yeah.
But I still think it has massive flaws,
yeah,
huge flaws
Yeah.
that a lot of people just ignore
Yeah.
for the sake of their own comforts or whatever.
I mean, I would argue that there is a vicious form of capitalism here in the UK that contributed towards Brexit, for example.
Which probably copies America, right?
Yes, I think that's you know, from my, I think that they're kind of related, and I think capitalism, if it's unrestricted and unregulated, also carries in itself the seed of its own destruction. If you think about it, you know, let's say if you're a manufacturer, you have a factory, and you have a whole bunch of 10 people work for you, right? Let's say these 10 people also represent the workforce outside and the people that buy your stuff. So if you replace all of these people with robots, then these people don't have an income. So how are they going to buy your product? Yeah. So unrestricted I think capitalism, and I think that's where I actually agree with Karl Marx. Capitalism is really great in making processes very efficient. You know, working in a university really just confirms that. Because at the university, everybody's very good at talking about stuff all the time, but they're not very good at making things efficient.
I see, right.
Yeah, but if you're running a business,
And universities, you're saying, are on the opposite side of the spectrum to capitalism?
that's sort of halfway through,
Okay.
half in the middle.
Yeah.
I think communism is really bad at that. But the Soviet Union was not very good at that. That's, I think, why they demised. So capitalism, and I think where Karl Marx got it wrong is he described something that is more like a evolutionary process rather than a revolutionary process. You know, I don't think you can force communism. You can't force socialism.
Well, because if you have to force anything literally by force, then you become the dictatorship that's forcing people to give up their rights or their goods or whatever. Yeah.
So I think that's what you had. The Soviet Union was really just another fascist kind of state.
Yeah.
It wasn't communism.
So in that respect, we have to give people the freedoms to own things,
Yeah,
to have private property rights.
yeah. I think that's...
But how do we nuance that and stop this imploding on itself, as you say?
Well, I think when I have these discussions also with my American colleagues, there are some really interesting things that I'm having a hard time understanding. For example, there was a colleague at NYU. He had diabetes, so he had real health problems, but he would not accept something like the NHS. Socialized medicine is like, no way are we going to have that. So you could benefit from that.
Yeah.
But no, they would by like, no. It's kind of like, and I think that goes back to something like conditioning, how you grew up, the kind of media you're watching.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of this idea about scroungers, not paying into the system, but then getting all the benefit out of these things. That's that kind of idea.
I hear that a lot. That was his argument. Why should I pay for other people who are sick?
Yeah, of course.
Right? And then I basically explained, well, it's called the solidarity model, and if everybody chips in, it's actually affordable and not that expensive. If you look at the expense of running the American military, they could be funding a healthcare system probably 3 or 4 times over if they wanted to, instead of funding the military in the way they do. And I think if you look at most economies in the West, military spending is much more than many of the other things that they spend. So we could easily afford that, I think. And technology will make that even more affordable. Like housing, accommodation, clothing, these things in the future can become cheaper with technology. So there's no reason for people at some point in the future to live in the street, or unless they really want that kind of life.
And some people do, I think. Yeah.
So I think I just don't want to live in a world where everybody is just out for themselves. I think we live together in a society or in a culture or in a community. That also means we have an obligation to look out for each other.
Have you heard this idea that the smaller the community, the more, let's say, communist or socialist it is, and as the community gets bigger,
Yeah.
so when you belong to part of a country, you can no longer share things in that way, because there'll always be people who take from you because you don't know them well enough to trust them and that sort of thing. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I haven't heard of that.
Because to your friends and family,
Yeah.
you share things. You say,
Right.
come in, help yourself to a drink, help yourself to
Right.
anything in my house.
Okay. Okay.
My home is your home, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But then try doing that. Try leaving your door unlocked
Okay.
and saying to everyone in the country, feel free to pop over. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you
So
can't do
I've
that.
heard this idea that you should adapt your approach
Yeah.
depending on how large the community that you're talking about is.
Yeah, I think talking about what is a country, I mean, what is Germanness? What is Britishness? To be honest, I never really felt German ever. I felt like somebody who grew up in the Black Forest. So I have a strong connection to my memories and the people that I know from there. And I think that would be like a community, you could call that. I don't know anybody in Munich. I don't know in Hamburg. These people are just as alien to me as somebody from Edinburgh or Glasgow. Except I don't understand what people in Glasgow say. So I think the idea of nationality has always been strange to me in the first place. So I can totally understand where you're coming from with this. I think it makes sense to me. And living in the Netherlands, I think, because Netherlands is a small country, I think in Greater London you have about almost as many people living in the area of Greater London than the whole of the Netherlands. I think Netherlands is about 21 million or something. And I think for that reason, because it's so small, things are also more regional. So cities have, the city government has more powers than, let's say, other cities, maybe in the UK. And I think you're right. I think the more power you have at the community level, I think that can only be beneficial. I can see that working.
Yeah, I think that sort of small community thing is dissolving as towns grow and things like that.
Yeah,
we sort of lose that sense of trust in the small community, and everybody. And
well, in London, I don't know. That's a huge place anyway. So these are these mega cities. I don't want to live in a mega city anymore. Breda is a small city. I can leave my door open. And
is that an invitation to everybody in Breda?
No, not really. But it happens to me sometimes. I forgot to close the door.
But you don't stress too much about it.
No, not really.
I'm not sure if you should air that.
No,
I'll cut that bit out.
Yeah, but it's funny that you mentioned it, because sometimes you get these stereotypical comments. My son would say that, in Spain, so he understands from his school history, Franco and the dictatorship, and one of the stereotypes, because you mentioned the open door thing, people would say that, under Franco, you could leave the door open. Nobody,
That's like the benchmark of how trusting a society is. Yeah. I can leave my windows open. Yeah.
So they would say, you could leave the door open, but then if you were Jewish, you'd be in trouble. Stuff like that. So but I think, I'm a federalist maybe at that level. So I think a federal government where states have as many powers as possible to do their own thing, I think that's a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not a centralist. I think that doesn't work. We've seen that.
What is a centralist?
Where, like France, everybody goes on a holiday in August. The entire country, and it's chaos.
And that's almost mandated. Like they have.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
like.
But when you can also see it in all roads lead to Rome. You can really see that when you look at ancient. So that's where you have a big center of power, and then things happen around. I think that's never a good thing. It worked for a while in history to bring up these big empires like Rome, but I think even a federal republic, it's none of these countries will last forever. All of this will go. Everything has a beginning and an end. Yeah. But maybe life in a federal state where local communities have more say in the way they run things, I think that's probably a better way of living, rather than a country where everything is run from. That's the big issue here in the UK. Scotland was complaining about Westminster doing everything. So I think if Scotland had really a parliament with proper autonomous powers, then I think the discussion about independence would go away at some point. Yeah, it's the same in Germany. Each German, and that's actually the interesting thing that was imposed by the Allies to make sure that Germany never gets as powerful. as it was, to give German states as much powers. But they all have a parliament. They all have tax-raising powers. Sometimes it's a bit complicated because the education system is also different in each state. So that can become a bit of a problem for recognizing these things. But I think it works actually very well. So I think, thank you, allies, for doing this to us.
You're forever grateful for that. Shall we talk about your book? You've recently published totally. A book, right?
Yes, that was actually very interesting to do that book. I had that book idea for a long time.
Okay, and this is about production.
Yeah, it's my second book. My first book was in 1999, and it was more a career handbook, interviewing experts into how do I get into film, right? So that was one. And this time around, it was really just about, it's connected to my PhD research. You know, all the people that knew me in high school are probably laughing now. Me, PhD and writing a book. Oh, I never saw that one coming. But it has happened. There it is. And
so finger up to them.
Yeah, exactly.
This one's for the haters.
Yeah, exactly. And the PhD was really about how social media is changing the way we make documentaries.
Okay.
But a lot of it also has interesting implications, I think, for film production in general.
What's the title of the book?
Creative Producing 101, you know, like your guide to short film making.
Yep.
And all of us, you know, when we start out in this, we usually end up making a short film. A short film is a great way of learning this, you know, so you don't have to go to film school if you want to do this, but you have to have people. You know, the book is really more like a handbook. And it's based on the film production value chain. There's a guy called Michael Porter. He came up with the value chain in general for business, and all it does, it's a way of looking at the activities in your business or project to see what's profitable and what isn't. But when I talk about profit, then I'm also not talking just about finances, because sustainability is, for me, also a really important part of it. And sustainability is not just about, you know, making sure we're not having any paper cups on location, because that's the smallest problem that we really face in terms of sustainability. Sustainability in film product, the big problem that's not solved in production is the distribution problem. You know, we make stuff, we want people to watch it, and where do they watch it? They watch it on a mobile phone, they watch it on a laptop, they watch it on TV, and that is a huge amount of e-waste, for example.
Right.
Yeah, but unless the people have these things, nobody watches what we do.
Right.
They can't see.
So in terms of the carbon footprint, those methods of watching are pretty bad.
Yeah, they're pretty bad. I mean, I think 2019, Norway had, 19 kilos of e-waste per head. And that's not just in terms of sustainability. The e-waste, that's not the only problem, because what do we do with all of this stuff? We don't keep that here. We send it to places like the Philippines or Indonesia, where old people or children sit on a heap of electronics and they put that all together, take it all apart.
Right.
And there's toxic stuff in there. So it's not healthy. Right? So there's also, sustainability is also about social injustice. So what I basically did is I took Porter's value chain, and there's another guy called Peter Bloor. He did something for the BFI. He expanded on that to make it the film production chain. And the European Union also uses this model to talk about the activities in film production, but sustainability was never a part of it. So I'd like to think of my contribution to this production chain by adding the sustainability part. And that includes things like child labor. You know, I don't know, Zoom, is it made in China? I don't know, who knows? If it was, is child labor involved, for example? And I think as a producer, you have a responsibility to do your best to minimize things like social injustice. You know, you can't make a film about, I don't know, injustice in the world and then have injustice methods of making it.
Very true. And I think we're quite blinkered to that in,
Absolutely.
Let's say, the West.
Yeah.
You know, because we talk about injustices within countries and inequalities, and yet we are probably the 1% in the world.
Yeah.
You know, we represent that same thing.
Yeah. I mean, we can't go to China and point fingers at the Chinese about you having child labor going on or whatever it is, and then at the same time do all of this stuff and send all our waste to these children.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's basically, we're not doing that on purpose. So I wouldn't feel guilty about it.
It's sort of like an ignorance, isn't it?
It's ignorance. And I mean, I don't think of us as evil people who do this on purpose. We just don't know that we're doing this, or well, we're only starting to understand it. And so I hope that the book that I've written is helping to make that ignorance a tiny bit smaller. Yeah. So the sustainability part, it also includes things like life balance for people that work in the industry. I mean, you've worked in it. You know what it's like. I mean, I've done that for. At some point, I was glad I would end up teaching because I just got sick and tired of having to do these endless shifts, waiting at 3:00 in the morning in a rainy forest because some actor can't get his shit together. So
I've only worked a very small amount in the industry, so I don't have that much experience.
Yeah,
with
so
what you're
there's
talking
that.
about,
And I just recently was in Germany. There was a huge scandal about a very famous actor who really became famous, but then he became an alcoholic, was abusive on set, did some really truly horrible things to people. So I also included a section on intimacy, which is not really often talked about, but I think it's an important part. How to shoot intimate scenes. Yeah. So that's also part of the production value chain as I see it. So it's not just about the paper cup. Really, at the end of it's the smallest problem.
Right.
When I ask my students, so what are you doing about? We're making sure we don't use paper cups. Yeah, but that's really I really like Albert. Albert is doing a fantastic job. I don't know how they get financed, but thank you, Albert.
Albert is the UK sustainability.
Yep. I think it's my favorite. It's my favorite group. There's also there's a US group, there's a German group, but I think Albert is the only one that also understands the power of green messaging.
Right.
So that's another way where we can make a huge difference by just normalizing green behavior on screen. So if we're going to have to not have paper cups on set, that's fine. But then make sure we don't show paper cups on screen, to normalize that behavior.
That's right, yeah. Well, and I think smoking is a really good example of that, right? Because that was outlawed on screen, I don't know when.
Yep.
But that was all part of
cutting
down on
all of these
on
things.
youngsters smoking from an early age because it looks cool on screen, kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's so the sustainability is part, but the book itself just covers everything from development all the way to distribution.
Great.
So it basically takes you through the entire process. What you're looking at, what are the activities that you'd be doing? So if you wanted to make your first short film, I think that would be a useful guide to have. What it doesn't tell you is all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, the things that happen with people. So you can't make a film on your own. So you have to have a group of people around you. But I think if you do, and if you find people that are good at what they're doing, then you can use this book to guide, as a navigation tool to get through your first short film project.
Great.
And then you can figure out if you still like it.
And where can people find this book?
Or you can just buy it on Amazon.
Yeah.
It's on Amazon. Just put in there Creative Producing 101 and there you'll find it.
Speaking of unethical
distribution, I know.
Amazon, yeah.
It's like, but I think it's a positive message in there that outweighs the negativities of Amazon.
It's hard, isn't it? We're caught in this massive contradiction, aren't we?
I
buy stuff on Amazon all the time.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
And I had the book idea for some time, and I just never had the time to write it. So I had the basic structure and the basic text, but then ChatGPT came along and it really helped me just write it up really fast. So I took all the text, spell check, grammar, these kind of things, phrasing. That's the hardest part of the writing process. So basically, ChatGPT became my editor.
Oh, really? It did?
Yeah. So I wrote it all up. I did all the writing, and then I put the text into ChatGPT, and I tell ChatGPT, okay, check for spelling, check for grammar, and make it readable.
Suggest different alternative sentence structures.
Yeah, and then it went boom, boom, done.
Really?
Yeah.
And was that pretty much the final thing? Did you then go through and check that just to make sure, or did you just trust?
No, I had to. ChatGPT gets stuff wrong all the time, really. But thankfully, in this case, I already did the groundwork, so I didn't have to do that. But I had to double check everything. Even when I put the right references in the text, it sometimes would output the wrong stuff.
Oh, really? Crikey.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really interesting that you use ChatGPT for that stage of the process. Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have taken me another year to write this. And it's like.
Well, that's a good example of how AI, in inverted commas for those who aren't watching on camera,
Yeah.
is improving.
Yeah, you can use
and,
that.
Yeah.
So, but you have to understand how to prompt it, and you have to double it. So it's not really easier. It sped the whole process up. It's kind of like working with a writing buddy that has no personality.
Yeah, that you wouldn't go for a drink with after
No.
you're done.
No, exactly. So, but that made it work faster, and that helped. And so I ordered a bunch of these books for our library, so our students can use it. And I think so that was really interesting to go through that. So I'm glad I got that book out of my system.
And it's the second book you've written. 24 years ago, the last one was.
24 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. So and that was really just interviewing people how they got into the film industry.
Right.
And then that's the one thing I learned is I learned how they got into the film industry, but I also learned that a lot of them, second, third, fourth marriages.
Really?
Yeah.
Big strain on your
business is
life,
really, yeah, totally.
relationships.
A lot of people are really possessed by some demons somehow. They're, and they just get obsessed about doing this. So maybe it's a bit better now. I hope so.
Who knows? Shall we talk? I think we'll wrap this up soon, but shall we talk about the photo that you brought in today, or rather that I printed for you, sent to me?
Yes.
For those who are on camera, you can hopefully see that.
Yes.
Who is this?
This is our dog Akira. It's a Japanese Shiba Inu, and she's the most important dog in my life. That's why it's in VIP. Why did I pick this picture? I actually picked 10 pictures, and there were other pictures that I had more to say about, but somehow this is my favorite.
Lovely. Okay.
There was at the International Film Festival in Rotterdam. There was an exhibition, and she was sitting there.
Oh, fantastic! So you take Akira with you to
everywhere.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. She's kind of like my private emotional support dog.
That's lovely.
Right now, I'm trying to, convince the school that I can bring her to school again, because too many people brought their dogs, and now the school says no more dogs, which is annoying. But sometimes I have to go to a critical meeting, or it's amazing how she calms people down, how she calms me down, how she just changes the mood in a room. So you might walk into a classroom or a meeting and everybody's already tense. She comes in, everybody goes, "Oh, look, there's a dog." Yeah. Wow. And so I want the school to let me bring her to school.
So we're going to put Akira up on the wall.
Excellent.
Do you want to do that?
Yes.
I'll grab some blue tack for you. Let's put
blue
it on
tack.
The back. Oh. I like to give my guests freedom to put it wherever they want, but yeah.
Okay. But I can see, Vincent van Gogh, he comes from Breda.
Really?
Mm-hmm. From a small village just 10 kilometers south of Breda, near the Belgian border.
I didn't know that.
He hated it so much he cut off his ear. No, he's from there. He's really, that's probably, it's well known in the Netherlands, but maybe not so much outside. So where should I put this? Hold on.
You go for it. And don't feel like you have to follow any kind of, I want the freedom to put it wherever you want. If I don't like it, I'll just change it later.
Very English. I don't know. There's Carlo, there's the universe. I was intrigued by this earlier because that reminds me of my dad, the work he does.
In what way? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The work he does, yeah.
But since I'm from Breda now, and since there is Vincent over here,
you go ahead. Can you get across to it, or?
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
Let me just move the cups.
Maybe, but I don't want to cover up. This. I'm gonna put him maybe just like here, like so. That looks good like this.
Oh, lovely. Next to the elephants.
Next to the elephant. That's the animal section now. So there you go.
Oh, lovely. And there's Akira.
There's Akira.
Okay. Anything else you want to discuss?
Yeah, I think it's lunchtime, isn't it?
I think it is. Yeah. Yeah. So Fritz, thank you so much for joining me today.
No,
that was an enlightening talk. I'm not sure we talked as much about your career and your stuff as I wanted to, but we went off on some lovely tangents, so that was good.
I know. I think we should never be in charge of developing curriculum. It's kind of like the curriculum developed by people with ADHD.
If people want to learn more about you, where can they find you? You've got a website, haven't you?
Yeah, just fritzkohle.com. That's
fritzkohle.com. Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Hey, it was fun. Fist bump. Do the Asian thing. Like, oh, like this,
Would you know this one? Fist bump. Cabbage.
I didn't know that one.
You don't know that one?
No, where does this
do
come
another
from?
one. Do another one. Fist bump snail. I think we'll end this here.